Yeah, just man, pretty much got in. So I wrote a thriller. It's called Dark Finds, and pretty much I wanted to create a marketing engine for it. And the best way, like, because no, writing is so boring. You're just stuck at a laptop. Like, it's so unglamorous. It's not exciting. So what ended up happening was I was like, okay, the book's a thriller. It's about a serial killer. Uh, let's start the Instagram around that. So I was like posting like Ted Bundy, like clips like that, kind of real psychopathic individuals, like con artists, all that. And it just blew up. Like it didn't on TikTok, just on Instagram. And it was the same content. It was so wild. It was such a difference. But that kind of segued then into, yeah, just a lot of people reaching out and just hearing really interesting stories off some of the followers. And it's like, okay, let's explore this further. And then, yeah, it's just the podcast kind of started that way.
My ex, who I actually talked to this morning, is a lead reporter at Audio Chuck that does Crime Junkie and all the top 10 crime podcast, and she loves this. But what I always find so funny is she was like, I'm so anxious and I don't sleep at night. I was like, you spend all day talking about exploring and researching like serial killers and tragic things, and then you expect to just go to bed and be okay?
Yeah, because that's it. Some of it will get inside you. That's the whole thing. Or you'll start to view the situation so much more differently. Like, because if you're constantly around darkness, like it's going to cloud your purview. You know. But Jesse Crosson on the podcast here. Jesse, I want to start off really quickly with Crosson is actually an Irish name. It's actually up in north of Ireland in Donegal. But yeah, from what I read on it, it means son of the cross. And your story, your life story is so wild. It must have felt like you were God's son on the cross, just being mentally crucified nearly at times. Like, but yeah, your just story's so wild. Like even to bring some of the listeners back there, like 2002, like from your website anyway. I've listened listened to you on a few other podcasts as well, but uh, you know, just coke, booze, and just almost threw your life away. Like obviously now you've done remarkable well, but like take us back there. How did this happen even?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had dinner the other night with somebody who I knew in high school who apparently I had bullied, and I didn't even remember this, but he reached out and he was like, "Man, it really, you really hurt my feelings. You really changed the direction of my life." And looking back, I don't even remember that because I think I was like hazing people with a stick, like I'd seen in some movie, and I did that to other people because they'd done it to me. And so what I did was I kept surrounding myself with the wrong people and kept kind of going deeper and deeper into that. If I'd surrounded myself with good people, I'd be helping people. But instead, it was people like taking and destroying, and it just kind of like fed upon itself. And I went from, graduating from high school, thinking I was going to take a year off before college, to finding cocaine and just like dropping off that cliff. Um, I'd say within the matter of 3 months, I went from this kind of normal, like definitely messed up or having my own issues, but kid to like a feral animal. Because I remember feeling at all times like I was drowning, and the only thing that would like keep me above the water was more cocaine. And I would have done anything, like absolutely anything to get it. And that's what I did. I mean, that's how I ended up committing a robbery and committing a shooting and kind of becoming this feral version of myself because I was chasing this thing that felt like it was the only thing keeping me alive.
And like prior to say the coke use, then like were you feeling drowning anyway? Like was that masking over something that was already there, or did the cocaine really force that out? Yeah, do you think?
No, I think I was running away my whole life. I mean, I actually I'm going to Omaha today to do a talk on this, but some people have like lacks on the outside. They grew up in poverty, they grew up with abuse, they grew up with other things. Other people grow up with lacks on the inside and also sometimes experiences other things. But I mean, the main defining factor for me was this feeling of lack on the inside. Like, no matter what I did, I felt like it wasn't enough. It was wrong. I wasn't smart enough. I wasn't good enough. I always was an overachiever because I felt like I had to be just to reach some base level of like being okay or being deserving of love. And it just was destructive. And I was always chasing something that would make this kind of like pain or this internal hole go away or somehow fill that void. And cocaine was the first thing I found that, at least for that 15 seconds or 2 minutes, felt like it filled that void.
And like, so that lack, was that like verbalized by others? Was it like teachers bearing down your neck, being like, Jesse, you need to straighten up. You're, a good student, but you're throwing your potential away. Was it your folks? Was it friends? Or was it completely internalized, like within your own, almost a self-deprecation kind of element?
I think I'm still working to grasp that.
Yeah.
Actually, as I'm writing this book and like trying to go over that, I'm looking at the things from my childhood. my dad definitely pushed me. I remember him telling me as a kid, he said like you're exceptional because I remember this story. He told me he went to go see a psychic, and the psychic told him that his third son or his third child was going to change the world. And he said, well, all I know about is you and your sister, but I lived a wild life. You're probably number three. There's probably another one out there. He said, so it's on you. Like, you have to change the world. And on the one hand, to sell that to a little kid, it felt amazing. It felt like, oh, I have all this potential and I can do all this good. And I look at my life. But it also was a sense of pressure because I always went back to that moment as a kid and been like, oh, well, I'm not doing enough. Like, if he wants me to change the world, I can't just do this. I have to do this. I have to go above and beyond. And then what would happen is I would just collapse and I couldn't keep going, and I would kind of dive into the depths of like eating too much or drinking too much or finding cocaine, and then I would feel bad about myself and work 10 times as hard. And it was just like working against myself in the most ridiculous way and never really getting anywhere because I was running on a treadmill trying to chase something that didn't actually exist.
Yeah, and like that hedonic treadmill is so real. It's like it pops up in so many different ways. Some people have it with dopamine, where it's like that's the real kind of epitome of the hedonic treadmill, where they're constantly chasing the next thrill. We were speaking just off camera before we started, and I was saying I moved into the country, but I feel like that them dopamine receptors have just toned right down from when I was living more in cities and stuff like that, because I think there's temptation everywhere. There's bars, you can go out, there's so much to do. I think your brain actually, I like actually to study an MRI of before and after moving to the country, because I guarantee you that dopaminergic system, that kind of nerve areas have really probably quietened down because you're not chasing constantly something else. But to tie it back there, like, was it escapism or no? Was it like a shot of self-esteem there in the arm? Get that, and back function, and I kind of have the self-esteem then to, or maybe it wasn't self-esteem, but was it the self-esteem then to be able to, go and feel that you were capable of doing all these things, or was it just escapism from the almost anvil hanging over your head of I need to get all these things done?
I think in the beginning it felt like finding that or excuse me, finding that center or finding that self-esteem or finding that power that I felt like I'd been lacking. But eventually, as I continued to make worse choices and kind of dig into a deeper hole, it became escapism because I couldn't stand to look at like what I had done to
Ah,
my
yeah,
life, even in a matter of weeks and months.
yeah. And so, like, was it uh, like had you input like poor impulse control then when you were growing up? Like, were you impulsive? Were you a risk taker, or no? Did the cocaine just literally was like a personality change almost?
No, I was definitely, and I had poor impulse control. That was on every one of my report cards at school. They would say Jesse's smart, but he, can't control himself. But it was also, I think some of the role models I had really showed me that the way to live life is to like kind of chase what feels good and run away from what feels bad. I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day because I'm 40 years old. I mean, I spent a lot of time in prison, and I still struggle to do, like you said, that the country like relaxing thing, that not the spike of energy, not the high, not the cocaine, not the sex, or not the whatever, but the just like calm time in the woods. It's what I need, and it's what brings me the greatest contentment. But it's really hard for me to slow down and feel that because cocaine and all the big things, they slap you in the face. When you're walking through the woods, it's a lot more subtle, it's a lot more quiet, and I keep waiting to get slapped in the face.
Yeah, and like I think what's really interesting there is what you bring up, like, because walking in the woods is very much a very introspective thing. You are alone with yourself in a very intimate way, almost. Where when you're jacked up, chasing, chasing chemicals, chasing highs, you're so dislodged from, you're so disassociated, almost divorced from yourself, and you don't have to deal with any of them internal conflicts or that internal chatter. It's almost, a doorway out. Uh, so that's really interesting. And like, so then when you got to prison, I know we go back into the story in a bit, but like, because well, I presume there's probably drugs in prison and stuff like that, but you can't go doing all this thrill seeking as much as you would on the outside. How did you cope with that then?
I want to say there are definitely people who do that. They create drama, they live in conflict, they live in gang politics. They can stay in that same kind of mindset of running away from the mundane and running away from those feelings by always staying busy. I was lucky enough to not. And I think it had to do with the people that were around me, some on the street as well as some who were locked up, who basically just forced me to slow down. And this is one of the best things about it was this was before phones and technology and the internet, because there was no like, oh, I'm going to check my Facebook, or I'm going to check my email, or I'm going to call so and so. It's I'm locked in a box staring at the wall, and there's not a lot I can do. So I went back to what I did as a kid. I grew up living in the woods and reading books, and so I went back to reading books. I went back to like diving into studies. I was lucky enough to be able to pursue an education, and it took me 15 years, but was able to basically go to college. And so what I did was just take all this other stuff and dive deep kind of into myself or into a book or into a project. And it wasn't the high that I was looking for, but it felt like safe. It felt comfortable because of all the chaos around me. Like, even though that was a high, it wasn't a high I wanted to be involved in.
Yeah, I think you said a really relevant, valid point, especially for kind of today's environment. That that resistance to slowing down, because I genuinely think there's like people have this addiction to progress. Like something has to be done. Like I need to advance this during the day before they can feel satisfaction, and we're almost prisoners to this like satisfaction game or this progress game, and it essentially is going to rob happiness and peace out of your life. There's no other way, because you have to like almost put all your energy into getting something done instead of putting into energy into what's maybe actually makes what would be more progressive would be to focus on yourself, maybe focus on the family, wife, girlfriend, whatever it is. So but how do people slow down? Everything is trying to ramp us up. I feel like everything is gearing up the chemicals in our brain to be more, I think, sensation seeking. Yeah, maybe it's sensation seeking, but everything just seems to be turning up the dial every day. Every new invention, it's creating this like mega sensation seeking machine in our brains.
Yeah. I mean, and that was how I grew up, was always looking for the next thing and the next project and the next sense of accomplishment. Then I found cocaine, and then I went to prison where I felt like there was nothing. But slowly I built that even in prison. I was working projects, I was writing articles, I was studying, I was teaching, I was tutoring. So I was doing that, but it was controlled because there were still limitations. Then I got here to the world, and I wake up every morning. There was a brief period of time when after the accident, but I wake up every morning at like 6 or 6:30 with the to-do list already going. I'm on my feet. I go down to the gym. I'm responding to comments and responding to emails and doing that. I'm running all day long. Like by 6 o'clock at night, I may like stop and just sit on the balcony and take a break. But otherwise, I'm running nonstop because of that. Because I'm trying to like achieve all these things or accomplish all these things. And what it takes for me, and I just did it. I actually just came back from doing it. I'll go dog sit, and I'll just make a dedication. Like, look, for the next hour, I'm doing nothing but playing with the dog. Like, we
Yeah.
may lay on the couch, we may play, we may run around, but none of the stuff to fill this void. I'm just going to be here and present. And dogs have been some of the best teachers I could ask for.
Yeah, they're patient too. Definitely patient. But bring us back there then to 2002. Like, how, tell, I suppose, the listeners, how you wound up in prison, and pretty much the the sentence, which was, it's eye opening.
Yeah, so like I said, committed a robbery and a shooting. We basically went to a house we thought was empty to break in, to try to steal where we thought all this money was. This guy had worked for this family, and he said they kept cash, and it was just all some craziness. Like, we were so deep in the cocaine spiral that none of it even made any sense. Like, we'd actually stopped and thought about it rationally, we would have known it wouldn't make sense. But we went there, and it turned out somebody was home, so it went from just being a breaking and entering to being a robbery, because we basically, well, I didn't, but my co-defendant pointed guns at this person and just like created this horrible scene. And then this family comes home to find their house ransacked, and just it was horrible. And then the shooting was basically when I got into the cocaine life. I was afraid. I was always feeling like someone was out to get me. I was always watching my back. So the first time somebody offered to sell me a gun, I bought it. And later, these two guys, they had stolen the gun, sold it to my buddy who sold it to me, and they called up threatening, saying, "Oh, this guy found out that we stole it. We need the gun back. We're going to jail, so you need to give us the gun back." But then it became, "You need to give us the gun back or money or cocaine." So clearly it wasn't about the gun. But they started threatening me, and they started threatening my buddy. And then they actually went to his girlfriend's trailer where she was living and wouldn't leave, and were threatening this pregnant woman alone. And I was like, "Oh, that's not going to work." So I decided to be the hero and step up, and ended up in conflict with them, but had that flash of like, this is insanity. So when we met, I realized like these two guys are armed and they're coming at me. Like, what am I doing? And I left. And they chased me and they chased me. And as basically one of them reached around behind him, in my mind, I knew he was going for a gun. I thought he was going for a gun. And so I just pulled the gun that they had sold my buddy out of my waistband and just unloaded it. And it's just by sheer luck that they didn't die.
Wow. And so, like, when you went to prison, were they in the same prison as you? Like, did they get locked up as well for selling the gun and
So they didn't get charged for that. They did when I was sitting in the jail. The kind of R&D staff, like the people who get you when you're receiving or discharged, the do the initial intake, they actually ended up calling me out and showing me those guys' mugshots because he said they were frequent flyers. They were always in and out for different things. And I actually ended up running into one of those guys in prison because I got to a brand new prison. It's the first day, and I'm just like, oh, I'm so glad to be here. It's so much better. And somebody's like, hey, you're the guy who shot those two people on 29, right? I was, yeah, that's me. So, well, you know, Brian's down the hall. And I was just like, well, this is going to be interesting. Thankfully, like he did the right thing and he walked away and I walked away and everybody was able to get through it peacefully. But I was worried about what the consequences of that were going to be.
Oh, definitely. Especially after something like that. But lucky there was, the conflict didn't kick off. But yeah, so again, you get caught then a few days later. And like, had you ever been to juvenile hall or anything like that? Like, this must be seriously alien for you getting,
It
to
was
jail.
very alien. In a weird way, though, I was so deep in the coke spiral that I went in there and I slept for 3 days straight. Like I hadn't
Oh,
slept in weeks, or I'd slept off and on for weeks, but it's just not functional. So I went there and it was one of the first times that I slowed down, and not in a comfortable way. Like I felt horrible, but I was able to slow down. I was able to sleep. I was able to be away from the craziness, and that's what I needed. Like all along, people ask me like, well, what could have changed things? Like I needed somebody to put a bag over my head and throw me in a closet until I sobered up. Like get me out of my own head. So in a weird way that happened, but what then happened is I woke up in jail like, oh my God, what did I do? Like, how did
oh,
I do this? Who have I become? With this sense of shame and just self-loathing and this fear of like telling anybody, telling my family. I didn't realize we were front page news, so everybody already knew. I was like, how can I reach out and talk to somebody? Like they're gonna hate me. They're never gonna forgive me. This is gonna prove that I've not been enough my whole life. That thing I've been afraid of, I've just proven by these acts.
oh my God, like, especially if you were like, if the coke was really masking over like a lot of this stuff, then it's almost like the pendulum swings so far the other way. It must have been like the ground just must have opened up and uh,
Yep.
swallowed you. And so, okay, you're in jail then, and so, like, how long did you have to wait there before your sentencing or actual court case?
So first I had to plead guilty.
Okay,
I didn't have to. I chose to plead guilty rather than go to trial because I was guilty, and there's no point in trying to fight this or trying to drag it on. A bunch of other stuff happened. I don't have we have time for everything, but they put me in a cell with this guy, and he was having a hard time, and he didn't know where he was going to go, and he was like, "Man, I just really need a place to go when I get out. Like my girlfriend won't take me, and my family, they're just bad people," and he just kind of sold me this story, and he said that if I found him a place to go when he got out, he would go run around and like find drug money for me, all the cocaine that I'd fronted to people or whatever. He's like, "Look, I'll get some money and I'll send it to you. That way you'll be okay. You'll have money for when you go down the road to prison." And I said, okay. So I called a friend and we got him set up with the thing. And it wasn't a week before this was on a farm. He loaded up a truck and a trailer, stole all these tools, all this stuff from the farm, went over the mountain, broke into a bunch of homes, stole a bunch more stuff. When he finally got caught, he told the cops, he said, look, will you drop all these charges if I tell you about this guy who hired me to kill the witnesses in his case? So then he goes and tells them that I hired him to kill the witnesses in my case. And he had done this multiple times before. Like he'd literally like made the same story up about somebody else multiple times in multiple areas, but they believed him. So they charged me with conspiracy to commit capital murder for hire, literally just on his word. So before I can even deal with the stuff that I actually did, I have to go to court for these like crazy charges that could mean I spend the rest of my life in prison. And the trial was insane. Like the one of the witnesses the prosecutor threatened to murder the prosecutor from the stand. The jail administrator who was there to prove that I'd had contact with this guy said no, they never lived in the same housing unit. There's no way they could have ever talked. The jail is very secure. Like the evidence that they presented just like proved that it was impossible. Though weirdly they were wrong about half of it. But it basically came down to did the judge believe this guy's word or not? And in the end, he finally said, look, I can't take his word beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm going to find you not guilty. So all of a sudden, I'm, pulling my hair out, losing my mind, thinking I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison for something I didn't do. And it was only then, about 7 or 8 months later, that I was actually able to go and plead guilty to the charges that I did commit.
so that was right. That was before you even got to trial. And like, is that common? Like then in prison, that you'd have them sort of characters that are constantly like, that kind of con man, cajoling people and trying to get them, and then ratting them out. Like, is that kind of common, or did you just meet a bad egg in that place?
No, there was a report that came out a few years ago suggesting that there are tens of thousands of people in prison because of jailhouse snitches that basically make these stories up. And he didn't do this in my case, which I'm grateful for. He was basically bad at setting people up. But what other people do is they hang out with somebody, they read their paperwork, they get all the information they can, and then when they go to the cops, they drop all these details that there's supposedly no way they could know except for the fact that this person had admitted to them. So that basically validates their claim. And in my case, he didn't do any of that. He just said he threatened to pay me, didn't say how much I threatened to pay him or offered to pay him. Just the whole story didn't make any sense. But all the time, this does happen to people where somebody plans this out really well, sets somebody up, and then according to the police or according to the prosecutors, they're guilty because how else would he know all this information? Forgetting that, like, you live in the cell with somebody, you have nothing to talk about but the things you did or the things you're afraid of or where you grew up or what your story was. But they do that as a way to basically get out of the crime that they did commit or the crime they're getting ready to commit.
Yeah, Jesus, that is a sly kind of individual. And like, did the cops not like spot a trick there that, we're being hoodwinked here by this guy that's trying to, just completely self-serving? They're not, like, is there no checks and balances that's
I
raises a
like
flag?
this sounds strange as somebody who spent so long in prison, but both the prosecutors from my area now I consider friends. I really like, I respect, because the way they do their job, they have integrity. They say, hey, we're going to do what needs to be done. We're not going to do anything extra. We're not going to punish anybody beyond what they need to be punished. He said, our job is to make sure that justice happens. And the one example that I really like is one of them said, he said, Jesse, like, if somebody steals $100 from you, do you want them to go to prison? I said, no, like, I want my $100 back. He said, yeah, that's not what we do, though. We take somebody and we stick them away and tell them, when you get out in 10 years, you got to pay that $100 back. Like, no, just give me my $100 and let him on his way. This doesn't make sense. But that's why I'm really grateful that we have a prosecutor's office or a Commonwealth's office that focuses on, like, what actually is the resolution that meets everybody's needs. Like, if this person is a danger, yeah, we need to put him away because we don't want dangerous people on the street. But if he's just annoying or did something stupid, we don't want to lock him up for years and cost taxpayer money. We want to resolve the situation.
Yeah, that's the balance, isn't it? Like, threat to public. That's lock someone up for that. But like, yeah, and like petty like drug offences. Sometimes it's just clogging up like the the penitentiaries or the jails. So, but anyway, we get you get the trial. You've pled guilty. So like, is there a trial? Like when you plead guilty, no, it's
No,
just a formality then, and
you
just
basically
sent.
just go in, you say, I'm guilty of these charges. I waive any right to appeal. I accept my fate, basically.
But the judge didn't look leniently on that by the sounds of the sentence.
He didn't. So, I was going to plead guilty anyways because I was guilty. And I didn't want to
Yeah.
go through a trial that would like re traumatize the people that we'd robbed or the guys that I'd shot or their families. Like, I just said, I'm going to plead guilty. But the sentencing guidelines, which are guidelines put forth by the state, they're considered like the fair sentences, originally called for from 8 to 13 years, with a midpoint of 10 years or 10 and a half years. And my lawyer just sat me down one day and he said, Jesse, you did some really dumb stuff. Like, you deserve to go in and you need to go in for 10 years and you just need to make peace with that. And he was so straightforward. I needed to hear that. And I said, okay, cool. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go in for 10 years. The first motion of my sentencing hearing was by the prosecution to change the sentencing guidelines, to modify them. So we didn't object because my lawyer said, look, he's already seen the old ones. This is probably our best course of action. The sentencing guidelines then call from 10 and a half to 16 and a half years with 13 and a half as a midpoint. And I was like, okay, well, it's 3 more years. I can deal with that. Like I've done everything I need to do. And then when the judge started reading out numbers, he read them out, and he read them out, and he read them out, and other people didn't do the math. I thought I did, but I was hoping I was wrong, because then my lawyer objected, and he said, Your Honor, like, what is the total sentence? How much time did you give him? And the judge said, well, I don't know, I just told you. So they had to go back and read the record of what he had said and do the math, and he had sentenced me to serve 138 years with 106 suspended. So I was told at 18 years old that I was going to spend the next 32 years in prison.
Whoa. And like, Jesus, that's a bombshell, isn't it? Like, because you were expecting what, maybe 10 years and 32. Like, how are you processing that? Like, is it shock? Is it disgust? Like, are you feeling sick? Are you numb?
It's definitely shock, a little bit of, that kind of numb feeling. But the problem was that deep void that I'd been feeling my whole life that said I wasn't good enough, that there's something wrong with me. That was the part that spoke up. It was like, see, I told you were wrong. I told you that you like were irredeemable. I told you you were broken. And it seemed like this guy had done it in his robes, with his years of experience and his Juris Doctorate. He was telling me I was worthless. I was done. I had no use in the world. I was of no value to anybody except being away in prison. And that's what I remember feeling, like just in that moment being like, yep, like I guess I was right.
And why do you think did he want to make an example out of you? You had no priors, Like, I know, like, the acts were bad, but, like, no priors, no criminal, criminal history. Like, why do you think that judge was so harsh? Like, was it to try and make an example? Was it a bad day for him? Like, what's your personal thoughts on that?
I think there were a lot of things. I do think to some degree it was trying to make an example because they had laid me out as a ringleader of the group, that they said I was the one who was the most serious or I had instigated this whole thing, which is somewhat true. Um, but I think it was also that conspiracy charge. Just even though I was found not guilty, he said something about
Ah,
like I think you wanted to do bad things and like you're just lucky it didn't happen. And the scary part for me is I didn't commit the conspiracy. Like I wasn't guilty of that. But I remember at that time when I was charged with that thinking like, man, well, what if there was a button? Like, what if there's a button I could press and all this would go away, but I wouldn't know who it was going to hurt? I mean, I would have pressed that button. I was felt like a rat in a cage and I would have gnawed my own leg off to get out or gnawed anybody else's leg off. So I think when he said that or when that happened, there was a sense of shame of, no, I didn't do that, but I would have. Like if there had been a button to press, I would have pressed that button. So all these terrible things he's saying about me, like maybe they're true. Maybe I really am that bad. Maybe I really am that worthless.
And a question there to you, because, and this is a question, I ask guests a lot to have, like, some could be traumatic stories, survivor stories, and stuff like that. Like, being who you are now and everything you've learned and everything you've accomplished since you got out, like, if you did have that button, would you press it? Or, like, do you think like that, I know, like, time in prison, it nearly sounds like a stupid question, 19 years in prison, but, like, do you feel it made you into something that like, that you just would never have got, like, or that you would be a complete different person, but you'd never have maybe achieved what you've done since you've come out if you didn't go through that experience?
I think in some way I needed a crucible, and it didn't matter what that was. Like maybe I would have joined the army, or maybe I would have climbed Everest, or maybe I would have, I don't know, tried to save a neighborhood. I don't know what that was, but whatever that was, I needed to be in a place where I was completely broken and I had zero hope, and then had to build back from that ground level. And that was what happened in court. That was what happened being told I was going to be in prison until I was 50. I think it could have happened other ways, but in a weird way, it was a blessing because, like we were talking about, it was the first thing that slowed me down. It was the first thing that pulled me out of this rat race and this craziness. And I no longer felt like I need to achieve to overcome because I felt like I was worthless. I felt like I had zero value. So there was no point in doing any of that. So it stopped me and it forced me to actually sit with, well, who do I want to be? Or how do I want to act? Or what impact do I want to have on the world? And for the first time, I was actually looking at that from an honest perspective, not a this is what I'm supposed to do or this is what I have to do, but what do I want to do? And in a weird way, prison was the first time in the first place that I was actually able to be myself because nobody cared. Like nobody cared what I did. If I wanted to sit around all day, if I wanted to do drugs all day, if I wanted to teach all day or learn all day, it didn't matter to anybody else. So I actually got to make those choices and choose that direction.
Definitely. And, like, I suppose because you've been on this, like, redemption arc, like, but do you feel like that, that energy could have been spent, like, into something else, like you say with the Everest thing? Like, what do you think that would have been? Like, I give you, just say I can wave a magic wand, carte blanche, we go back to 2002, you're 18, you get into rehab, you get off them. What would their life goal have been? Like, because now that's what, Jesus, 2002, 23 years ago. What would that big dream have been? Like, and it's probably hard because, it's really, I can remember when I was 18 and stuff like that. Like, you're a complete different person. But what would that have, like, if you could do it all again, dream be?
I mean, I know I needed structure. Like I could have had a lot of dreams, but they wouldn't have worked if there wasn't structure, if there wasn't a way. Looking back, I've wondered if going to the military or going to Job Corps, or going to Peace Corps or something like that would have been an option. I've thought about, well, what if I went to like a monastery? What if I went and locked myself away and meditated for years like I did in prison, but without having to cause that harm first? Um, I think what I would want to do is somehow get to the place that I am now. And I didn't, I don't know how that would have been, but I think I would have chosen the hardest task I could find. But it's interesting because it was in prison that I learned that I could actually be tough and do difficult things. Because up until then, I never felt like I was doing enough. Like in school or in playing soccer or wrestling, like I was never doing enough. I was never winning enough. I was never pushing myself hard enough. But it was in prison again where nobody cared that I learned to really like tap deep down to be like, you know what, I'm gonna run this mile in under 6 minutes. I'm gonna lift this weight. I'm gonna do this thing that I think is impossible, but I'm gonna find some way to do it. And being in that environment really taught me that. So when I was 18, I don't even think I truly believed that was possible. So I probably would have signed up for the military or signed up for some special forces program and I would have quit because I didn't have the heart then. I didn't know that I could do it. I didn't believe in myself. So I think whatever I had tried to do, I'm not sure that I would have been able to do it.
Yeah, and the mad thing there is, like, a lot of the stuff you said, it's like, seeking discipline, which is really, because instead of, like, because when I asked that question, your brain went straight to kind of more discipline. It was like army, meditation, monk, monastery, and stuff like that. But you, like, I get a sense there where you almost need to feel you need to be held back. Like, there's, it's just, there's something inside you charging forward, is there?
Yeah, I mean, and even to this day, like I said, I still get up and I have that list that's moving forward. There's things that I have to do. But what I found works is that discipline or that structure where I build that in, where I make sure I'm going to go dog sit for 4 days. So yeah, I'm going to get my work done, but the other time I'm going to play with this dog, and I'm
Yeah.
going to force myself to get off this treadmill because it didn't actually lead me anywhere. Or I have friends that I go with, or I make sure I go on a hike, or until I
Yeah.
did had the arm issue, I would go to jujitsu, I would go for a run, and I would push myself really hard. And the good thing about doing that was I was taking myself all the like mental treadmill of like what I need to accomplish or what I need to be in society or how many people I need to help. And I was just purely diving into this moment of like lactic acid and I can barely breathe and this hurts, or I'm just present with this dog, or I'm just present jumping into this cold water, but just bringing myself back to my body and being fully present because then I didn't need to be running so fast.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense just to kind of get the brakes on sometimes. But I want to go back to one other point there because you said, like, you found a toughness in prison. But I can imagine for, an 18-year-old kind of like white guy going into like, one of the most dangerous environments you could probably go into, prison in my eyes, anyway, what I imagine. But, what was it like at them first few weeks? Like, were you like, oh shit, I'm the new guy, and because obviously there's a huge pecking order by the sounds of it and stuff, but were you like, feared up, like wondering what's going to be around the next corner, or no? Is that kind of a misconception maybe someone that hasn't been to prison would have?
I would say in the jail, I was on edge in the beginning, but then it actually got kind of calm. There were fights and there was BS, but it reminded me of school. It wasn't so out of control. It was just egos and people being mad because it was hot. It's 100 degrees, so somebody punches somebody else over a soup or a, ramen noodle. Once I got to prison, it was different because it was just like this level of tension that was always there. And I didn't really know, I didn't understand it. So when I would feel it, I was wondering what would happen. And it was like 5 days after I got out of prison that I watched somebody pull out this giant Rambo knife and try to chop a guy's head off. And I was like, oh, like that's where I am. This is the environment. But at the same time, in that same place or in those same prisons, it was calm 90% of the time or 99% of the time. You still had that tension. You were still worried about it, but nothing was actually happening. And weirdly, that's what made it worse because it's like if I knew every Friday somebody was going to try to kill somebody, cool. At least I know on Friday I got to be on my, P's and Q's. But I never knew. It might be a day, it might be a month, it might be a year, and everything's cool. And then all of a sudden there's a riot on the yard. This guy's getting beat to death, or this. And not knowing always kept that sense of tension and that sense of like, I have to be on guard because this could be the day.
Okay, so what's like simmering up through that tension? Like, why is it just, disputes? Is it like gangs? What's creating that tension that's kind of flowing through the atmosphere?
I'd say the majority of it is just ego and circumstance. It's, only the last prison I was at for 10 months. All the other ones had no air conditioning. So in the summer, it's 100, 110 degrees, and this, brick buildings where it just like radiates heat out of the wall. You don't necessarily have the best food or the best, kind of conditions. Guys are dealing with that. Guys are dealing with kind of like trauma and heartache about losing a loved one on the outside, or feeling like you're being left alone, or losing your friends, or losing your family, or losing your girlfriend, or losing your wife. I remember one guy, lost his kid, and he didn't do it. You could see he just had this murderous rage in his eye because he was powerless. He was the most powerless you could be, and he'd always solve things through violence. So he wanted to hurt somebody because that would make him feel powerful. Because in that moment, he felt like there was nothing he could do because he couldn't. His child was gone. So it was all these things that people just didn't know how to express. It was not having good coping mechanisms, not having opportunities or places to express those things or to process those things. So we processed them the best way we knew, which was to argue or to fight or to play sports or to do something else. And there were gang issues, there were money issues, there were like quote unquote legitimate things, but most of it was just ego and not knowing how to express ourselves or communicate.
Yeah, I can imagine it's kind of a primal almost, kind of environment, fueled by testosterone. I can imagine as well. But you mentioned the kind of the guy that had that like murderous glint. Obviously, like there's a reason behind that. You lose a child, it's going to be absolutely crushing. But one thing I'm kind of curious about, like, did you ever come like face to face, like with pure evil? And I know like people have a different connotations to that. Some people look at it from a religious angle. Some people, that it's like a psychopathy kind of chemical brain structure angle. But like in your estimation, like, did you ever come in contact with someone that just chilled the absolute fuck out of you?
So yes. Also, people will often ask me that based on the kind of religious language, like evil people need to stay away. And what I learned in prison is there were a few people that I came across that were wire drunk. Something there was just not right, and it was. It scared the hell out of me. The vast majority of people, the guys who committed murders, the guys who committed terrible things, the guys who were capable of violence, they were just people who put in the wrong situation, abused or suffering the wrong thing over and over and over, learned that that was the way to function. Or they were afraid. Like the night of the shooting, I didn't shoot these guys because I wanted to be big and strong, because I wanted to be a predator. I shot them because I was afraid they were going to shoot me. Like I
Yeah.
did these things out of fear that other people perceive as being evil or attacking somebody else, when in reality, we're just trying to run away and be safe. Now we created the situation, so we're responsible, but vast majority of people were like that. But yeah, there's one guy I can think of. Uh, he was tall, he was kind of scary, it was just like there was no light behind his eyes. It's the best way I
Mm.
can describe it. And I do remember because I befriended guys who everybody was terrified of. The first guy that I tutored to help get his GED was a guy everybody was afraid of because he was 6'6", 260 pounds. He grabbed this guy by the shirt to punch him and literally ripped his shirt off his chest. Like just crazy stuff I saw. And that guy ended up being a friend. We ended up like talking every day. We ended up doing GED stuff. We ended up boxing. Like so it was rare to actually find somebody that scared me and it felt like something was missing. But he was one of a few, and I will forever remember his face because you would just see him, like the way he looked at you, he looked through you. You were
Oh.
not a person, you were a thing. And I remember that feeling just kind of hitting me, even in this place where I felt less than, or I was talked down to by the guards or by the staff or by other people, or I experienced that kind of neglect. But there was a different level of dismissal of my being or my worth by this person that just it gave me the creeps.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah, my dad was actually, he was a prison officer most of his life, but he actually said like that because it's, you mentioned an interesting point there that he said the murderers were typically the best behaved prisoners. They were really like they worked in the workshops. They studied. Now, from what I can hear, like there's a big difference between I think the Irish penal system and the American. Like I think the Irish is very much actually really focused on rehabilitation. Like I was so shocked, man, listening to one of your videos where it was like, even the toilet roll, you were rationing the one a week, and I heard you on another podcast where you were saying like, you nearly have to fight like to get education spots, like in the Irish prison system, like that stuff is they're trying to really push prisoners into that. Like some don't want to, they'll just smack out in their cells or that. But like the vast majority, they have options and do all their studies and everything. So, like, I think that was like eye opening when I heard you talking. Like, I think you'd said on one of the other podcasts, prior to going in, I think your mum had enrolled you in college courses. But I was shocked that like that isn't a prerequisite to go in like that. You could get that. That's shocking to me. Or
To be fair, the college thing, everything had to be paid out of pocket when I was in. About 6 years ago, I think, they started doing Pell Grants for college for people who are incarcerated. So they started supposedly providing it, but none of the regulatory things behind the scenes have happened. So colleges need to be certified or accredited to be able to have this access to this Pell money. And in Virginia, we have four colleges, four community colleges are, and that's it. There's not a single 4-year degree in Virginia. There's these four colleges that do, I think it's six prisons, but we have 30 prisons. So you've got 24 prisons with no college education, no higher education. They do have some kind of trade schools, and Virginia is good in a lot of ways. Like I like the state of Virginia, but there was a higher education conference down in New Orleans not that long ago, and some of the people from Virginia were sitting down there, and they were talking to Mississippi and Kentucky, which are considered like very backwards, much poorer, much less developed, states, and their education system is head and shoulders above ours. And the Virginia people were horrified to be like, wait, Kentucky and Mississippi are doing better than we are? Like, wait, what are we doing? We're doing something wrong. So it feels like there's actually momentum now. But yeah, the whole time that I was in, that was never a focus. Nobody cared about education. Nobody cared about rehabilitation. Nobody cared about therapy. Like I had to fight to get my college classes. I had to fight to get the calculator I needed to do my college classes. It was a last resort to let somebody get an education rather than making sure that they got one.
that's just so what. Like, surely there's a like massive opportunity for someone to set up like like because even over in Europe, like you'll have open university, you'll have all these ones. Surely to God, like there's a massive opportunity for some kind of startup college to get into all. No, but you're not allowed internet. Is that? Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, no
But
internet.
even
So like
just
when I did my college classes, it was all written by hand. I get a textbook, I get another thing, I respond, all done by hand.
But so where's the cost coming from? If the textbooks are there, like it's the accreditation, is it? Like I know the states yeah, college fees are expensive over there, aren't they?
Yeah, very.
Yeah, where in Ireland it's like €2,000, I think, to study in college. So I think maybe that's the big that could be the big parallel difference that over here
Yeah.
it's just cheaper for college. But like even school then, like if because I can imagine some would have dropped out high school and stuff like that. Have they to fight to get a seat in a classroom to do their end finals?
Thankfully, no. So over here
Okay.
we have the high school system, and you have something called a GED, which is general equivalency. So it's basically the equivalent of going to high school. that was mandatory, and that was just a federal program that made everybody do that. You lost good time, or you got in trouble, you had to spend more time in prison if you weren't in classes or you hadn't gotten your GED. But that was the end game. Like that was what they said. Okay, now you got your DE, you're good. Now we could fight to get a trade. Like I had to fight to get a journeyman electrical license. I had to fight to get in the program. They gave me the book hours to get the on-the-job hours to get a license because they said, "Oh, you've already taken a trade. You're only allowed one trade." Like if I got 32 years, don't you want that trade to be like updated or relevant or current? But they don't. It's what I remember one of the officers telling me, and this is the whole mindset that I saw in DC. DOC. It's rules are rules. We got to follow them. Doesn't matter if they make any sense. Rules are rules. You know what it is. And so, unless it's explicitly written in there that we're going to make sure people have access to education, if we're going to make sure people get to college, it's not going to happen.
But like, surely, like, because education's going to have a huge correlation with reduced recidivism rates, surely. So, like, why would that? Like, but it's not. Like, do you think it's not trying to rehabilitate? It's a punishment system, is it? Largely,
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't even think it's people label it as for profit or evil. There are a lot of people that make a lot of money and they want people to keep getting locked up because they make a lot of money. But I think it's just the culture, like the zeitgeist. In our culture, we say you do something bad and you get punished. So that's what people assume happens and what people assume should happen. People will tell me all the time on videos like, you shouldn't have books, you shouldn't have TVs, you shouldn't have anything. You should have to bust rocks and stare at the wall. And it's like, what do you think the mental health of somebody who busts rocks and stare at a wall for
uh,
10 years is going to be when they come out and they're your neighbor or they're your coworker? Like, do you think that's going to go well? But people don't think it through. They just say, hey, this happened. I want to see punishment.
wow. So they're out for their pound of flesh more so without even knowing the details of the case, which is wild.
Exactly.
And again, that's not civilian really to do. At least the education or like books or give them like, if you've that much time like to spend, I can imagine if someone's occupied doing in a workshop, learning woodwork, reading a book, doing studying for something, it's going to give them far less time to be getting in trouble in prison. Like, because I can imagine the gang, like, stuff, I don't know, if, like, with Virginia and stuff like that, but, like, or maybe it's all the prisons in the States, like I said, all very gang infiltrated or kind of influenced.
It really does depend on the state. Like some entire systems are run by the gangs, like California, a lot of federal prisons, the gangs run everything. That's how it's done.
Yeah.
It wasn't like that at all when I first went in. It was almost rare to have gangs because we're Virginia. We're like this rural state. We're not like New York. We're not California. But over time, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it was no longer just guys from the street. The gangs did explode on the street, and they got bigger. It was a lot of people kind of enrolling or joining while they were inside, and the gangs would say, "Oh, well, we can run the phones, or we can run the drugs, or we can run this," and it just started being a thing that happened. And I was really grateful I got out when I did because I started seeing that where this is a blood phone, this is a this phone, this is a, and it was just BS that I didn't want to have to deal with.
Yeah, I had another American guy on. He was from California. Matty Boy is his name, but he did 11 years, I think it was, in San Quentin. But I think San Quentin is the one in California, I think. But my God, like he was saying, it's so gang infiltrated. He ended up setting up like this. It was called, he's like, Heritage is Irish, but it was like, something Irish affiliated mafia. It was something like that. But yeah, everything is by the sounds of it anyway. From his story, was so gang in the Californian system, and well, it wasn't like that when you went in anyway in Virginia. No.
No, and it's what I saw was that happened because the state stopped doing even more. Like in the
Yeah.
beginning, there were at least more things to kind of fill your time, or there were more activities. They may not have been the best activities, but there were more things to do. They started cutting funding. They started pulling back on programs. They started being short staffed, so you couldn't even go over to class or go over to program or go over to religious class. Instead, you just sat around. And as they pulled back, the gangs stepped up and people started structuring things. And to go back to what you said about education, there are these incredible statistics. If somebody gets an associate's degree while they're in prison, which is a 2-year degree, their risk of recidivism goes down 60%.
Yeah.
If they get a bachelor's degree, which is a 4-year degree, the risk of recidivism goes down 80%. If they get a master's degree, statistically speaking, there is zero recidivism to prison. Like people do not come back. So if we really cared about public safety, we would do that. But instead, the state pulls back and says, no, we'll just let the gangs run it.
But why do you think that is? Like, is it apathy more than say, kind of conspiracy? Is it just apathy? Like we just like because if it's the state legislator that gets to decide, like surely, and like the governor, I don't want to steal the thunder there, your story of getting out and stuff like that, but you might have had a bit of an ear to the governor. Like, surely, is there a lobby group there that you can be like, can we get some education systems in? It's the most intuitive thing. And you have the stats there as well, of them recidivism rates. But is it an apathy or just, it's too big to change? Or maybe it's what you said, the zeitgeist.
I think it's apathy to some degree, but it's also everybody. America operates under a scarcity mentality. It's not what can we do together. It's, hey, if you get something, that means I don't get it. So every time they say we want to fund a prison education program, people say, well, where's my education program? I didn't commit a crime. And they'll say, okay, well, we want to fund a prison rehabilitation program. People say, well, where's my therapy? I didn't commit a crime. And people become jealous of these things that actually will benefit them and everyone else in the long run. But because they're not getting a piece or they're not getting their slice, they say it's not fair and they don't want to see it happen. So what ends up happening is people sabotage this entire system because they want their piece or they want their payoff, and if they're not getting it, nobody gets it.
Yeah, and that scarcity mentality, uh, it infects everything. And it's so like, from an evolutionary perspective, it makes so much sense. It's like, that's the way we evolved. The brain structures there for that kind of scarcity, or to detect scarcity and stuff like that are so ancient, and they're so highly evolved that it's really, it takes a really civilian brain to be able to kind of outmaster it. But Jesse, to go back there then, so 19 years, and so you did your journeyman or your apprentice electrician. You got your degrees. You seemed like studious in there. Did a lot with yourself. But you were given 32 years. How did you get out early?
Yeah. So like I said, it was the first time in my life I was really living the life that I wanted to, or living the way I
Yeah.
wanted to. And there was an experiment where, I was getting this education, I was moving forward. What I found was I had done drugs, I had chased money, I had chased everything else. Through happenstance, that guy I mentioned before, this guy was 6'6", 260 pounds, asked me if I would help him get his GED, or basically get his high school diploma. And it took 6 months and it was frustrating me back and forth. But I remember the day he came back to the pod with tears in his eyes and picked me up and hugged me because he had gotten his degree. And I just remember the feeling of that. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. This hole that I have inside me, this fills that hole. This is what I've been looking for. So I spent the next 16 years or 17 years tutoring other people, mentoring other people. So as I continued my own education, my own growth, I found ways to share that with other people. Then, after 16 and a half years, which was the original high point of the sentencing guidelines, I filed a petition for a conditional pardon. This is basically asking the governor to commute the rest of my sentence. Now, back then, they might do like 2 or 3 of these a year, and it was because somebody had donated a bunch of money, or it was somebody who'd been out years before and they were just doing it for PR. It just didn't happen. So when I filed, it wasn't believing that I was getting out. It was being, okay, I'm doing everything in my power to like try to fight for my release or try to say that I want to be worthy, and then I can lay down. I can accept that I've done everything in my power. I'm not in control of the rest. But weirdly, it started picking up. A local reporter reached out to me, who actually I talked to you about at the beginning of this thing, the one
Yeah.
who's a reporter for the podcast studio. She reached out to me and she wanted to do a story on the abolition of parole because we haven't had parole in Virginia since 1995. So all of a sudden I'm on the news and I'm being, broadcast to everybody in the community. And then I'm writing articles and I'm getting people to write letters of support and local business owners are writing letters of support. And it just became this bizarre storm of everybody basically saying, no, we think this guy has done enough. His college degree, his mentoring, his tutoring, his articles, like, we think this is a good guy. So then after 2.5 years of that, it still just seemed like, okay, 2.5 years ago, I put this piece of paper in, like, we'll see if it ever happens. 2.5 years ago on August 16th, or 2.5 years later on August 16th of 2021, they called me in the office. And it was weird because this was during COVID and we were all locked down. We didn't know what was happening. And the phone is sitting off, or like the handset is sitting off the phone, and the speakerphone is on. And the lady just says, Mr. Crosson, are you sitting down? And I looked around and I said, no. She said, well, you should be because you're going home today. You've been granted a pardon. And all of a sudden, having 10 years left of my sentence, I'm sitting there like on one knee with tears in my eyes, being told that I'm going home, that I'm actually like getting out of prison, which I didn't even think was possible. It was a pipe dream.
Wow. So Jesus, and right in COVID, you would have been locked down for ages. It probably, and just to get that news, it's yeah. Like, what is it? Like, what's the swell of emotion? What is it? Everything? What are you feeling? Like, is it excitement? Is
I,
it actually? Is there fear there? Because you've been inside for 19 years. Like, shit, are you like, oh, the world is going to have moved on so far? And it would have, like, 2002, well before iPhones and stuff like that, social media, really. What was the feeling then?
the first feeling was that there's no way this is real. that
Okay,
this is a
so
mistake,
disbelief.
that this can't be real. It's a prank, or somebody made it, like, there's no way. Because I wanted to believe it, but it didn't seem possible. But then when it became possible, when I realized, when I had to go off and sign all this paperwork and come back with an escort, and everybody in the pod is like clapping and shaking my
Ah,
hand and smiling because I'm going home, I was like, oh, maybe it's real. Like, if they believe it, maybe it's real. But then, yeah, I walked outside and I saw my mom for the first time because there were no visits during COVID. And then I ended up meeting Courtney. And the whole time I was just on autopilot because I was frozen. Like, this couldn't be real. I didn't know how to process. I didn't know how to imagine. And then the first time I got into a situation where I had to make decisions, where we went to Costco, this big warehouse, to buy stuff, I didn't know how to make decisions and I had a panic attack. I shut down because for so long I had been told what to do and where to go and what to wear and how to be, that the idea that I had to choose those things felt like a burden. Like, I can't do that. I don't know what I'm doing. And I existed in that, like, state of fear, that state of confusion, that state of shock for weeks, if not months.
and like, was there, like, did you find a longing then for it? Like, or for the structure you had, like the friends you would have met in there, even the routine, like, because it can be. I can imagine it's so discombobulating coming out into like a world where you have ultimate almost unlimited amount of choices you can make. But in there, you were on a steady stream. And from my read on you, anyway, as we've talked, like, that discipline was really good. So, what was it like then, having every choice in the world that you could make? If I want to, well, maybe parole you couldn't have and stuff like that, you might be able to leave the state. But having, tenfold more opportunities, more choices to make, what was that like?
At first, it was overwhelming. It was,
Yeah.
like I said, having a panic attack, or trying to choose between 30 different types of soap, and just freezing, not knowing how to make a decision or what to do moving forward. But then the problem was, I fell back into that old state we were talking about at the beginning, where I'm chasing the next thing, because all of a sudden I got to go to the DMV so I can get a license. I got to go set up a payment plan with the courts. I'm going nonstop every day, all day, over and over and over. And the structure and the mindfulness and the peace that I had found inside with that routine was gone. And I was just a rat on a hamster wheel running full speed again. And it took time to, like, slow down and really step back. And I fall back into that regularly. Just like I said, that's still my first impulse when I wake up in the morning, and I have to force myself to step back, or I have to create structure to step back, because otherwise I just fall back into that manic mode where I'm chasing the next thing.
And like, I suppose, any tips like for that, like, creating a structure, like, are you writing out a plan? Here's what I'm going to do today. Or you maybe, journaling that I'm going to take, or committing. I think you said that earlier on, like, where I'm going to take 1 hour here and I'm going to mind the dog. Like, any tips on how to instigate that structure into your life, to force yourself to slow down?
Yeah, I don't know what works for everybody else, but what works for me is I do. I make a checklist every morning. When I get up and I have that list of all the things, rather than starting to do one of them, I take the time to write down the list and have the little check boxes, so that I click finish one, I check it off, so I get to notice, okay, I've done these things. And one of the things I put on there is I need to have half an hour during the day for me. I would love to have more time. I would love to. So I'm going to sit and I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to go walk in the woods, or I'm going to take a bath. I'm going to do something that's just purely for me. It's not productive. It's not solving any problems. It's just for me. And what I found is, having that half hour, or if I'm lucky, an hour, that kind of resets me. I come back to my body. I finish meditating. I come out of the woods and I'm like, okay, now I can start fresh. But if not, I just keep running nonstop. So putting that in my day and having that as one of the things on my checklist, that keeps me centered in a way that just running would never keep me.
Yeah, so there's almost a committal to just having that bit of you time, which is, I think it's really good. I need to do that, I think, more often myself, and try slow down at times. But so, Jesse, like, getting out then, like, the success that you've kind of found on TikTok, you're doing so many things. Like, what has all that been like? There was no such thing as social media, never mind an iPhone when you went in. Like, how was that integration? And yeah, tell us about, like, that success. Like, 1.3 million, I think, followers on TikTok, is it?
Yeah. I didn't even know what TikTok was. Like, I'd seen it on TV or I'd heard about it, but I didn't know how to make decisions. So if somebody suggested something, I would do what they said. If somebody said, you should go apply for this job, or you should go read this book, I did, because it was easier than having to make my own decisions. So a friend of Courtney, a friend of my then girlfriend, said, you need to make a TikTok video. And I was like, okay. So I downloaded TikTok. I went to the top of a mountain, and I didn't know what to say. So I just said, I don't know what to say. I just got out of prison, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing. And I was just in this state of shock. Like, if I go back and look at that video, it was horrifying. But that was captivating people. People were interested in that story, and it just started going and going. And it was like 5 months in, I had 500,000 followers. A year in, I had a million followers. It blew up into this thing that I didn't know what to do, but it gave me a bit of that structure. When I was talking about like needing that, because I was during COVID, so I would go to work during the day and then I would go home at night and I couldn't go out. There was nowhere I could go. So I made videos and I answered questions and I or like responded to comments. I just interacted with people because it gave me a little bit of structure. And what it created was the opportunity to start a nonprofit where I work with people in the jail, the juvenile center, and adult incarcerated people across the country. It gave me the opportunity to travel. Like I'm flying to Omaha, Nebraska today to speak at the Correctional Educators Association conference. Like it gave me all these opportunities that I couldn't even imagine. Like when I made that first video, I never imagined this would lead to something. I was just like,
No.
okay, Katie told me to do it, so I'm doing it. Then I'm done. Then I can go on to the next thing.
Yeah, so it was a springboard into some of these. And tell us about that non-profit. Like, so what's the sort of talks like? Because I know when I'd reached out to you in the email, like I was really curious about your story and that kind of, turning struggle into a strength. Like, but is that kind of the nature of your interviews, or not interviews? Sorry, your when you're speaking engagements, and just with the non-profit, is it trying to help wrongful convictions? Is it just trying to help get people more support when they come out? What's involved?
So the speaking engagements can be basically are tailor made to whatever the situation is.
Okay.
Like this is a correctional educators association, so I'm talking about education, higher education in prison, what I've seen work, what hasn't, and essentially talking about the transformative power of education. You talked about taking adversity. I've done a talk called Adversity as an Incubator, where I talked to a bunch of startups and business people and venture capital people and said, hey, when bad things happen, they can make you better, but only if you choose to make them make you better. If you choose
Yeah.
to see them as a challenge and an opportunity. So I've got all these kind of themes that I can talk about in any situation. But so with the nonprofit, when most people start have an idea and then fight for funding. We got funding before we had an idea. Literally, somebody was just like, "Cool, I think what you're doing is amazing. Here's a check. Go do something good in the world." So my goal was to set people up with the same support and opportunities that I had had, so that they had a greater chance of success. So in the juvenile center, we go in. We did a speaker series last year where we brought in formerly incarcerated speakers every month to tell the kids, like, "Hey, I've sat in that chair where you are. I know what that's like, but you've never been where I am. You've never been running a business. You've never been elected official, or you've never run a group before. You've never been a community organizer. If you want that, here's my name, here's my phone number, here's my email. Let me show you the way when you get out." So we're connecting the kids with opportunities and support of people who've been where they are. We also connected families, the kids, and local, basically community resources, so that not only the kids but the families can know what's out there and know how to better structure or ask for help or get the things they need. We're starting to do the same thing in the jail. We just had a staffing issue with that. But then on the national level, we're trying to create that. So our local work is kind of like a pilot for what we want to do. So on the
Yeah.
national level, we connect people with mentors. So we have volunteers who have professional experience, or they're entrepreneurs, or they have lived experience. They've gotten out of prison, gone through reentry, and we connect them with people on the inside so they have better social capital. Like if you think about it, like if you went to school, or you lived in a neighborhood, there's always somebody who helped you get a job or helped you find a place to live or helped recommend you to somebody else. Like that social capital is real. It creates opportunities. But when you're locked away from the world for 20 or 30 years, you don't have any of that. The
No.
only people you know are in prison, and they're no help to you, just like you're no help to them. So we're trying to connect people with those in the community who can help guide them and help resource them and help direct them towards things that will be beneficial. And then that way they can see themselves as somebody who can imagine that being true. Because so often guys are like, yeah, like I'd love to go to college, but people like me can't go to college, or I'd love to get that job, but they won't hire someone like me. We're trying to connect them to resources and to people who will say, no, this is exactly what you can do, and I'm going to help you get there.
And like, how charitable have people been with their time? Like, is has it been a challenge to get people to come on board with you, or no? Are people like fairly, charitable, want to help out, want to, give these people that second chance?
It really depends.
Yeah.
When we started out with the mentorship program, we had probably 1,000 people who said they were interested. Maybe eight of those people actually followed through and started doing the work. So there was a lot of promise. There wasn't a lot of follow through on that, at least statistically. But especially locally, what I found with when we could do the juvenile center, local, people who've been there, people who've been through it, they loved out. Like the most helpful people I found in this space are people who've been there and know what it's like and know what the struggle is like and are willing to do anything they can to help somebody else get ahead or help somebody else get on their feet. But additionally, I'm really lucky to live in a city that has resources. Like I was meeting with the head of juvenile probation and parole the other day, and she used to live in actually a wealthier area, and she had that job, and she was like, the college didn't do anything, the community didn't do anything, the Chamber of Commerce, like nobody does anything. Where I live in Charlottesville, everybody, like we get help from the college, we get help from the community college, we get help from businesses, we get help from the Chamber of Commerce, we get help from the city. Like everybody is invested in making sure that people succeed. It's the most non-scarcity mindset I've seen anywhere, and it's a really positive thing.
And a huge positive for the community. Like this, that has to
Exactly.
be a huge priority. But look, it sounds like you're doing absolutely Trojan work anyway. It's having really good. Like what a story. Like I know it's only an hour episode, but by God, I think we've covered a lot in it. An amazing story. Like, I think I find it really inspiring. I think a lot of the listeners will as well. The face. I love that adversity incubating almost. That adversity is that thing that it's what way you look at it. It's either going to come down crashing down on you, or you can turn it into a ladder. And I think for you, Jesse, you really turned it into a ladder, and I think you're doing great work with the, with that non-profit. So, hats off to you coming out and getting on that kind of pathway. Yeah, where can I know you have a lot of socials and websites. I will link them all in, but just give I suppose the listeners a quick run through where they can find more about you as well, or where they can connect with you.
Sure. So spelled out SECOND, second-chancellor.org is the nonprofit. We're always looking for mentors. We're always looking for opportunities. If you have guidance or support or programs or anything for the kids or for adults across the country, we are looking for all the help and all the cooperation we can. You can find me on social media, same thing, second, except this is underscore Chancer, CHANCER. Look me up. I would love to connect with people. I love doing these speaking engagements where I find people are interested, and I'm going to talk to people who run the DOC education departments who are looking at higher education, looking at trades, and looking at things, and they're valuing my voice, which is one of the most amazing things. And I want to value the voices of people who have that experience, or who have ideas, or have support, because it's only through working together we're actually going to be able to make a big change.
Definitely, and get a big lobbying group there. Kind of, the more people that kind of connect and come together, the more powerful it gets. So, I will put all the links down in the description. Jesse, look, thanks so much. I know you're a busy man, so I appreciate taking the time out of your day and jumping on. Fascinating story, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Garrett.
Cheers.